Today, we're going to talk about innovation and experimentation. And there are a few reasons to why. The first is that data, advantage, and experimentation are the two battlegrounds that will differentiate you. Secondly, creativity needs to be profitable today. And creativity is often connected to innovation. And to innovate a new product or a service or to create a new website, it needs to lead to purchase. You don't afford to do this without testing it if it will work before you launch it. And regarding profitability, it's said that experimentation raises the conversion by 20% on a yearly basis. But despite that, a lot of retailers don't do it.
A big part of innovation is experimentation, or more specifically, A/B testing or split testing. A lot of companies are doing this using Google's tool Optimize. And one reason it's been so popular is that you can use parts of it for free. But as of this September, Google has decided to sunset it, which means to shut it down. Lots of companies will be affected by this, hence needing to find new ways with tools when it comes to experimentation. Acknowledging this, Google is now choosing to partner with Optimizely and their tool for experimentation and A/B testing, the Optimizely Web Experimentation Platform. So, Eleanor, neither you nor me are experimentation experts, but luckily we have with us today two experts in experimentation in the studio. So with that, I'd like to welcome Magnus Sundberg from Columbus, who is Growth Lead and Digital Advisor, and Simon Chapman, who is Director at Optimizely. And Magnus, as Eleanor said in the beginning, Google has said that data advantages and experimentations are the two battlegrounds that will differentiate you in the future. What do they mean when they say that?
Yeah, what they mean. Google means that the ones that actually master the data and effectively work with experimentation and fostering a good culture about experimentation, they have a competitive advantage over those who won't. And nowadays, data is that's a valuable resource, and companies that actually collect, analyze, and leverage on the data, they have a competitive edge. And because they could use this quality data to understand customer behavior, market trends, financial data, and other relevant information that could be, or maybe should be used to actually understand and optimize your processes, personalize experience, and gain a deeper understanding about your customer. And about the experimentation, that refers to the practice of testing ideas, strategies, and products, other feature, or whatever actually, in a controlled and a measurable manner. And here you use often an academic theories to gather real-world data and feedback from your customer to validate your ideas or assumptions and so on. And this helps you to adapt quickly to the market and meet the customer needs, and of course stay ahead of your competitors.
Welcome, Simon. What is your take on this?
Sure. So my take around anything to do with experimentation is to test your hypothesis. And whether that's you have a gut feel about how something should be, or how you feel customers or organizations should interact with your website or your digital channel, however it might be, it's about testing that hypothesis. And so, to the point that's just been made, organizations are gaining increased levels of maturity about how they want to interact with their customers, their users, and to drive that next best action or that behavior that they would like. And so whether that's through testing, beginning your journey, or somewhere along the journey towards your maturity, you may choose to use different pinch points, different ways in which you try and influence behavior wherever that person is across the customer journey. And so this is something that we feel obviously very passionately about. That's why we obviously are a market leader in this space, and why we have lots of organizations who start from, as I've said many times before, the small beer, the very simple experiments, through to the larger experiments where they want to test what I call the throw and catch, Did the thing that they clicked first actually influence the thing at the end? Well, hopefully. But the point of it is to test the hypothesis so that you know that you are driving behavior and that you can take that gut feeling that you have to then hopefully validate that gut feeling.
Okay, thank you. Now, Magnus, as I said in the introduction, Google is sunsetting Optimize. Why is that big news?
The big news is that they actually closing down a widely used and easy to use tool. That's a big thing. And now all these users need to find a new tool like Optimizely Experimentation, which is a really great tool. But the downside is that the organization need to spend time and effort to learn a new tool and pause all the experimentation they're working on at the moment. But on the other side, it could be now it's time to take testing and experimentation seriously, because now you're adding a cost on your budget on this, and you need also to follow up when you have a cost on the budget, and look into what do you need to follow up on. Maybe not if it's a positive or negative result, but maybe on the number of experiments that you have performed, or what you actually have learned from the experimentation, and show the value of testing.
I just need to add there because me and Karsten, as you said, Karsten, we are a bit of a rookies when it comes to experimentation. But is Google Optimize shutting down? Is that like the same as Google would shut down Google Analytics, where I come from the marketing side? A lot of people actually use.
I would say it's different, to be frank. I'd say they're doing different things. Obviously, I wouldn't like to compare the two because they're doing, some people will say they're doing similar-ish things. I would say that they treat them as two distinctly separate conversations, to be honest.
I just mean that in the case where there's a lot of people using Google Analytics, and there's a lot of people using Google Optimize as well.
Yes.
Oh, it's significant.
Yeah, right.
In terms of the significance of it, of course.
Yeah.
How often is it that, for example, Google does choose to sunset a tool? Not that often. So it's when someone, a major, large vendor like Google, decides to then make such a significant choice, of course, it's quite a seismic thing to then respond to and react to. And obviously, I was involved in the program to respond to that. And so that response was a hugely coordinated effort on our part, but it's quite a rare event. So to answer your question, it's that we, not say surprised about it, but more the fact that it's that you need to respond to it quickly, and also take advantage of the opportunity that it brings, because they're quite rare events.
Yeah. And why do they shut down?
Why do they shut down? It's because quite often organizations, I wouldn't want to speak it out of turn of Google why they would choose to do this, but it may be that it isn't aligned to their core offerings of what they want to do anymore. So maybe they want to go in a different direction quite often. Maybe it's something that they choose to sunset because they see the market going in a different direction and it's not their core focus anymore. So there are a wide variety of reasons. And so all I can say for confidence is that we are primed and ready to respond to the call to action.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything you would like to add, from Optimizely's perspective, Simon, regarding the sunset shutdown and you being acknowledged as a preferred partner?
Sure. So Google acknowledged us as being a preferred partner. Yes, absolutely. And so by that, it means that we've been acknowledged as being a market leader. We are. We have a very well-established experimentation solutions that offer the ability to, as I've mentioned earlier, whatever your level of maturity, to take people, as you mentioned already, those organizations that maybe do simple A/B tests, simple experiments, through to the more mature organizations who are doing lots and lots of testing. So for us, it's about matching the offer in terms of what Google does. We do. It's about the ability to work with the existing Google ecosystem. We do. We're an alliance partner. So therefore, with long-standing relationships at product and other levels within Google to support, maintain, and enhance our roadmap together with Google. And it's the ability for us to then drive experiments based on the fact that all of these organizations are coming from Optimize and are looking for familiarity, confidence, comfort in a solution that can not only work with their existing data pools, but then allow them to run the kinds of experiments they've done before, and then to do more things with our platform, which is in addition to what they were doing before.
And Simon, do you think it's a risk that actually other smaller organizations miss the opportunity and stop the testing now? They start a little bit from Google side, and now they need to find something new.
Of course, it's always going to be a risk.
Yeah.
And I think the mantra I always hold on to is that when you're looking to continue running those tests, it's about making sure it's aligned to your core metrics and core KPIs that your organization wants to do. So that's about making sure that all levels of the organization understand the point of why are we experimenting? What is the point of us experimenting? What are the results that we gain from it? And is it matched to our core KPIs and metrics? Now, with that alignment, of course, then it's easy to evidence and to prove it because you've got the cause and the effect. You've got the means that we know that we did this experiment, therefore it drove this behavior. Now, without that, it's very difficult to evidence it and therefore to prove what you just said. So I would say to continue doing it, there needs to be a point of running the experiments. And so I would be expecting the majority of organizations who run experiments and run optimized programs already will be doing that. So therefore it will be easy to transition to us because they're already doing these kinds of things.
One reason that I think that why experimentation is so important today is because of the uncertain world that we actually live in. Old truths, they don't apply anymore, for one thing. In addition to strong growth, I mean, a lot of companies have been focusing on growth, like all the time. But now you also need to be profitable. Otherwise, you will be wiped out. And at the same time, you need to be more creative than ever. You have to be creative in your choices of like sales channels, in the development of your business, in how and where you engage with your customers, how to build your brand, and in your leadership in the whole organization. And I mean, it's really, really complex, right? So we need to have the ability to apply creative thinking to drive better results. And that's where my brain gets stuck at, like better results. Isn't that like the key reason to why you should do experimentation, Magnus?
Absolutely, if that's what you want to achieve with A/B testing.
Yeah.
Of course. But maybe you want to challenge with this old truth with through the experimentation and find new possibilities. But the important thing is what you talked about. It's what you want to achieve with this. Is it aligned with your overall business goals? That's really important to think about.
That's where you start, like the business goals.
Yeah. What are the business goals? My department, what could I do, and what I'm working with at the moment. And when you come to the positive, if you come to the test, if it's positive or negative, that's actually doesn't really matter because the point is that you learn something and that you do something with the result to take a step further. And here's, I have a quote from Jeff Bezos here. It's not an experiment if you know it's going to work.
I don't like that quote. I'm a bit of a control freak. I want to know what I'm doing. So I understand what it means, but...
If you know what it is and the result, you already have implemented it.
Yeah. Simon, please.
Sure. So you're absolutely correct. I like that quote as well. So I disagree on the quote.
I know.
So the point of it is, you're right, is to define metrics that actually are, as I mentioned earlier, that you can have tie them towards business goals and business objectives. Otherwise, you'll never get the buy-in that you need. So even when you're starting out in your experimentation journey and you've never done it before, the first question you'll probably get is why should we experiment? Or I don't want to experiment on areas of my website that will impact the behavior of what's already happening. Are you going to experiment at a bad time of the year? You know, for example, you could theoretically choose to experiment on a key commerce or shopping time of the year, and it might impact the result of the conversions that you have. So it's all about matching to the kinds of KPIs that actually you would like to track for, and then subsequently making sure that they are tied to the business goals, as we've already mentioned. So my key mantra around that is to, I guess as a cliche, is to start small, think big, and scale up. So you start with small areas where you can then prove it, test a hypothesis, make sure it's doing the thing that you would expect it to do. Then once it's doing what you expect it to do, then you move on from that, because any experiment is always about validating your hypothesis, testing how you feel to make sure that actually it's the thing that you expected to happen or not. So therefore, it's about that, but you don't know until you try. So once you've tried, then you can evidence it, and then you can either refine, reform, or even try again with the next best experiment, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So A/B testing, for me, I mean, we've been talking, of course, before this webinar, that A/B testing can be quite anything. Like it could be like a headline in a newsletter, like you often try in marketing divisions, like which headline will get the better opening rate of the newsletter. It could be like small things like that, and it could be like really huge things. Can you give us a few examples of like the range that when you can use experimentation?
Let me take an example. And as a start, this was not a test. It was a joke. It was an April 1st joke. And the grocery store Lidl, they had a joke in social media about they starting selling sneakers. These blue, red, yellow sneakers. You remember that? And the buzz was so huge, they actually needed to start selling these sneakers. And they still do. And from the first... when they first started, the sneaker was sold out in a few hours, and it's still a collective item that the people collect. And so afterwards, you could see this: was this an experiment or a test, or was it a joke?
It could have gotten them into trouble, though.
But what you can do actually here, this is an example, and but you could actually just implement a button, buy the sneakers. And start testing. And what do people actually think about this? Are they interested in our sneakers? And then you could have a movie, information, a text, but it's not available at the moment. But you could see the trends. Do people actually, are they interested in our new service or product?
Yeah. And Simon, I mean, I think that you work with a lot of different sizes when it comes to A/B testing. So I know that when you moved your experimentation solutions to Google Cloud as a part of this expanded collaboration, over 2 million experiments were enabled. And I love the quote that you said, that we are the world's largest digital laboratory. Which in turn created over 10 billion Swedish crown in increased revenue for the companies that use the platform. So could you give us like an example of like a big project within A/B testing?
Sure, a big project. So if you're working with let's just say a large retailer, and to come back to the point that was made, not all tests have to be huge. It can be that you're working with a large retailer, and we work with lots of large retailers, where even increasing, let's just say changing a button, so it's instead of saying one word, it says another word, that can be a huge experiment, because you're affecting how people will not only interact with the customer journey through a retail site, but also how they will then hopefully be persuaded to buy that product or service that you're offering. And so for retail, I wanted to make sure that people understand it's not just that you need to get, obviously 20% is brilliant, but even getting 1% is huge, because if you've got a lot of footfall onto your site, or to your app, or to your service, getting an increase in conversions of 1%, 2% is phenomenal. And so for the larger projects and larger organizations we work with, if those are the kind of metrics that you achieve from running experiments, that's fantastic. But it's not just about that. So I talked about very small experiments, and they can be micro experiments where you change a button or change the phrase or a word or a sentence to try and influence behavior. It can be something much bigger. So you actually choose to change the hero banner, or you change the behavior of when someone clicks on this, they see this, or you optimize the search results. So they see different orders of ranking of products and services depending on what you feel is most prominent to them. So different kinds of experiments can garner different results. But one final thing to say is it's not just retail. It can also be that if you're thinking, well, you're watching this and thinking, well, I'm not a retailer. Fine. If you work in any other industry, conversion doesn't necessarily mean someone buying something. It can mean someone fills in a form. It can mean someone interacts with a page, someone interacts with a service, someone does the thing that you want them to do. And the most important thing about any acquisition funnel or any conversion is actually that you are getting them to drive towards the behavior you would like them to do. So however you do it and however you influence it, it's most important to measure the success, but also to experiment on the kinds of things you would like to do to drive that behavior, either at micro or much larger.
Yeah, and I know that we've also been talking about that often it's not about how many experiments you do. It's about the time that you do the experiment. I'm learning. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So the phrase I use quite a lot is, and I think it touches on what Jeff Bezos said actually, if you're going to run an experiment forever, it's not an experiment, it's a permanent. So because it's not an experiment. Experiments are designed to try and test and validate what you want to do over a period of time, too long, it becomes, in my view, pointless, because you're running it over such a long period. You can have seasonality and other things that impact that may damage the experiment for the results that you expect to receive. Too short, and you may actually get not enough statistics or analysis to be able to then understand, was it a good experiment? You've got not enough data to work with to understand what the point of the experiment was. So there is a median in the middle where actually, and I know it's not a direct answer to your question, but it's more around, do I never have enough data to have an understanding of the point of the experiment? Yes. Has it reached that significance? Yes. Can I now understand why people did what they did? Yes. Can I use it then to run further experiments with the insights I gained? Hopefully, yes. And so once you have that, it means that then you can run further experiments with the basis of all of this good quality data from all of the previous experiments that you've run to then build new audiences, new insights, new analysis, new things that then can be used to determine the next experiments, but armed with good data to support those hypotheses.
Over to you, Karsten.
Thank you. I love this talk. It's really interesting. So Magnus, we've established that one of the reasons to experiment is incremental growth. But in our earlier talks, you told me that experimentation can actually improve the organization's operations overall. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, it's about here. It's getting a little bit difficult to scale this with the A/B testing and experimentation, because in one way or another, it's silos between departments, persons, countries, and other parts of the organization. And in order for the entire company to actually gain from the experimentation, you need to create a good culture, and you need to work across silos. And that's because you could test in any part of the organization. But when you start creating and perform and analyze a test, you need skill sets from all over all different kind of departments. And as you see here, we have a small PowerPoint on the screen. Marketing department often are responsible for the acquisition, and then it's moved over to e-com that's responsible for the conversion, and often CRM or someone else is responsible for retention. And on top of that, you have the IT department, you have the sales department, you have the development department, and for sure you have some external parts as well. But it's still one customers that need to move through this. So you need to get this company together. And so what we see when we working with different kind of customers and scale this with testing, and also introduce cross-functional meeting between these different kind of silos and have an agenda that's really clear, the silos start to fade out. And you have an organization that focus more on your most valuable parts, your customers, instead of your own silos.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that we've established that the experimentation is a good thing, but let's say that in the audience there's a retailer who hasn't started or doing experimentation at all at the moment. What would be your best advice, Magnus, as to where to start?
Really short, just start. but don't overdo it in the beginning. And think about what we talked about earlier here. Don't do it alone. Involve other people in your business, other departments. But just a few things that you could remember if you start up with this. We talked a lot about this. What do you want to achieve? And what's the overall goal for your department and your business? It's really important to think through this. And then you need to analyze the result and what have you learned from the test. And then you need to share the result in your organization to show what are you doing and make it fun, celebrate, do something because you have done something good. Often you earn some more money. Even if it's one, as Simon said, even if it's 1%, you do a lot of good business. And to make this a little bit more systemized and maybe a little bit more academic, we often help our customer with we call it an experimentation card, and we could have a look at it here as well. And it could be a good start, even if you do one experiment or you do a big set of experiments, because you have an idea, a hypothesis of what you're supposed to do, and you have observed something. It could be a good thing or bad thing or something you want to test or change. And therefore, you want to do something which should lead to something. You write it down, and then you start doing the test, and you have the test period. How long time do you run this test? And the result, you fill in the result, whatever it could be. It could be more than one result as well. And you fill in the learnings. Now you have document this, and you keep it. You could share it in the organization and with your friends. And then you could look at it a little bit later to see about the learnings again, so you don't do this test again or you do the wrong things. So this could be a good start.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'd like to address a concern that I'm sure someone in the audience might have. Google Optimize is sunsetting this September, actually. So let's say that I've been doing some experimentation with Google Optimize before, and I don't want all of that data to disappear come September. Simon, what do I have to do?
Well, in short, work with Optimizely. But secondly, reduce the fear in that part. So can we work with the existing data that you already have? Yes. Can we work with the existing Google ecosystem? Yes. Do we have an established alliance partnership with Google that means we not only are running on Google, but also we have extensive integrations with Google's existing ecosystem and beyond? Yes. So what I'm trying to get across to you is to remove the fear. Any work that you've done already can already be used and then used to drive experiments and to drive your experimentation programs that you already have, but then to go beyond what you're already doing. And so through integrations, let's just say with Google Analytics or with BigQuery, it enables you to not only take the audience information, take the analysis and analytics you're already doing, but then to take that data and be used for other purposes across the Google and beyond. Now, it means that those integrations are being added to, enhanced as part of our extensive roadmap. And through our alliance partnership with Google, it means that we're always adding. And so we work very closely to add new functionality through that. And just to say one thing, we were one of the chosen vendors and partners by Google to deliver experimentation. So we're very proud of that. And as we're recognized as a leader in the experimentation space, we believe that we're well placed to not only offer a very, I'd say, smooth transition from using Optimize to us, but also to benefit and to take advantage of the existing data that you already have to run fantastic experiments.
Thanks for addressing that concern, Simon. Now, I think it's safe to say that we've covered the why and to some extent the how in terms of tools, but what skill sets do you need in order to work with experimentation in your view, Simon?
Sure. So there's three types of personality that I come across that work with our solution. And so number one, it can be the business practitioner, the person that understands why should I be running the experiment. So that person quite commonly could live in marketing. And so they understand the brand, they understand the customers, they understand the personas. They've worked out who the key individuals are that interact with the brand from all the different touch points. And so they may be the beginning of, let's run an experiment to do this. Let's see what happens if we change this and this. But they may not have the data by which to form the full or complete picture. So they'll rely on a second person who's the data scientist or the analyst who will then get them that data through maybe using BigQuery or data pools, data analysis to give them the support for their hypothesis. So they can say, right, well, if you run this test and it's tied to our goals, then potentially it's this or that, and you might just have drive this particular outcome. Now, that can be from a very small level of maturity because you can start very easily with our platform. So if you are a very low level of maturity, you can begin to do that very easily from a very small place, and small beer, as I say. But then if you choose then to do something more advanced, we can then work with you as you mature. So the third particular skill set is around people that do development work. So developers who can maybe do more of the advanced tracking, the advanced conversion pieces, where you may, as you mature and you grow, you may want to do more sophisticated things. So we can support you on that journey. But it can start from a very small space. But I think the most important thing to understand is it starts from understanding your audience. And so the two beginning roles are well placed to understand the audience to then drive the right experiments.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about when I hear you talk, I think about courage and curiosity, right?
Of course.
Takes both just to get at it and try, I think.
It's what it is. You have to want to try, and that, I'd say, natural curiosity to run experiments should be what drives people. And we have lots of organizations that do that. And I think the important thing is not to be afraid to run an experiment. Try something. Does it work? Great. If it doesn't work, try again. And the ability
That's
to run
what it's all
well,
about.
it's true.
Yeah.
And fail fast is that key mantra. So you're trying things to test the hypothesis because you don't know what the output might be. You're trying it to see what it might be. And it might be, dare I say it, you're wrong. And actually, the thing did the right thing. You just maybe didn't understand why before, but actually it drove the right behaviors. And so you want to repeat more and more of it. And so experimenting, I know people can need courage and can be fearful, but I would say don't be fearful because lots of organizations are already doing it, hence the largest digital laboratory, for example.
So what's the most common rookie mistake? Beside on not trying it at all.
I would say don't overdo it. You want to do too much, and you prepare and you prepare and you prepare, and then a little bit too big. Just start small, as we talked about, and have an idea what you want to do.
Agree. I think the other thing that people do, and I'll use a visual representation of it, is that people start off with an audience this big, and then they'll say, well, I then want to target people in this location, and I want them to be to this page, but been to that page at least 10 times, and been to it 10 times in the last week, and then 10 times in the last week between 7 and 8. Oh, that's my audience. There's not enough people in that data pool realistically to form an opinion. And so some people may say there is, but I don't agree, because the point of it is you need enough of a pool of data to be able to draw a hypothesis, to understand did the thing I did actually drive behavior in some way. And so it's be specific about a certain point, yes. Too generic, obviously there's no point to that. But this is massively too specific, and actually you can't gain any insight from that because not enough people will interact with your experiment.
So what is enough of a pool of data?
Whatever matches your KPIs.
I don't get accurate answers in this interview.
It depends. It depends really on how many people go to your site, how many people interact with your app, what people do. There's no real sort of hard and fast answer to it because it depends on really also what the conversion metric is. If it's the fact that you're a luxury brand and you have less visitors and your conversion is much lower because your big ticket item is so much more expensive, for example, then to the point from earlier, increasing, let's just say, conversions by 0.1 or 0.2% is huge because the value of the item is huge. So therefore, does it matter that I have millions of people doing a certain thing? No, but if I increase the conversion from this to this by 0.1 or 0.2%, that's phenomenal because that may be 4 or 5 products, but they're very expensive ones at that. So there's no real, I'd say, hard and fast answer to it. It's just more about how does it match to the kinds of behaviors that we expect to be driving.
And if you narrow it down to if you want to have the information for these few people in the end, maybe you should move over to a form instead and ask them question instead of doing a test.
Yep.
So if it's too small, form enough, it's an experiment or A/B testing.
So do you have any resources or best practices you recommend for beginners to learn more about avoiding these common rookie mistakes?
I think on one thing, it's when you start, you have an idea, but often people have a lot of things to do on the table the whole time. And if you add A/B testing and experimentation, you need to focus on that and not just running on what you used to do. And there's a crisis over there. Okay, we skip this A/B testing today. I'll do it some other week and do my normal work. You need to have the time and focus on it for a long time. That's one thing I should say.
Agree. And I think one resource I think that's really useful for most customers I speak to, or even partners I speak to, when they're beginning their journeys, is actually to use our experimentation toolkit. which is available on our website, which gives you things like action sheets, so you can use them to understand, well, what kinds of tests should I do them, what's the benefit. So it tries to get you to drive your behavior towards running good experiments with good outcomes. So the toolkit, we can share that link with the audience after this session, where people can then download the toolkit, understand exactly the kinds of things they should be doing, formulate their ideas, and then use it to try and drive their experimentation programs. But we feel it's a really valuable resource.
Great.
So far we've been talking about experimentation in sort of a broader perspective, but then now we will narrow in on experimentation to enhance the customer experience. And I suggest we do that by going through how Optimizely helped HelloFresh and their app with this. So Simon, can you walk us through the why and the what of how HelloFresh improved their customer experience with the experimentation?
Sure, thank you. And so HelloFresh approached us with a need and a want to improve how people interacted with their brand. And so we're all familiar with what HelloFresh does, and so lots of people can try out their services, and that's fine. But what they wanted to also do was actually understand, well, what other elements, what other things can we do to try and help and enhance that customer journey, how we can then pull upon lots of different data pools to then understand, well, how can we target these people with the basis of informed analysis. And so one of their key things that they had was actually a lack of data trust. And so that trust in that data meant that the experiments or the things that they were doing and running, they weren't doing this from a basis where they had lots of information which they trusted and acknowledged that had a high level of trust. And in fact, when they were running the experiments, they weren't as confident as they would like to be with the position of trust as the backdrop. And so tie this together with the kinds of metrics that they were also looking to run. If you don't have trust in your data, then you also don't have trust in the metrics that you're using to form a hypothesis on. So therefore, the two are intrinsically linked. And so furthermore, you don't have a source of truth. And so that source of truth, by having good metrics and having good data to fall upon, means that you're not as confident in your experimentation program as you would like to be when running your experiments.
What was the reason they didn't trust their data?
It's lots of different silos of data. So, and that's quite common for organizations that we speak with, not just HelloFresh, but across lots of different organizations. If you think about the state of MarTech, for example, that diagram we've all seen with huge numbers of MarTech solutions that are all disparately spread. And if you look at it 10 years ago comparing to when it is now, there's so many more solutions. And so for every time you have another solution, I'll try another one, and there's another pocket of data there and another silo. It means that that source of truth becomes much more difficult to get to. And so it means that where do I have to go now? Oh, another database, another cloud storage provider to pull in that data and collect it to then hopefully gain insights from it. So then HelloFresh weren't unique in this challenge. In fact, it's a challenge that I think many organizations face. And so getting that to aggregate it, pull it together to give that source of truth is a constant challenge.
So what did they do with the data? How did they sort it out?
Consolidated is the short answer.
They did,
so is the short answer. And so what it meant as well now is not just consolidation of that, but also by getting that source of truth and the ability to understand, well, where the data, to do a data map effectively, to understand, well, it's here, it's there, it's there, it's there, to then understand, well, where is all this data? What's its purpose? What does it solve? Who does it benefit? So the who, the which, and the when, effectively. I need to know what it's for, what's it doing, why is it doing it? It then allowed them the ability to have over 150 different metrics to track for, because they knew, well, this is the data that forms the basis of why we should be doing the thing that we're doing. It's difficult to do that without having an opinion on the data that you already have. So you can't get to the metrics without knowing what data you have and what the benefit or the point of the data that you're storing. Now, what it's enabled them to do as well is to, obviously, by working with our APIs, so very fast decision making, it means that they can do that decision making much, much quicker to not only use the data to capture people in the moment when they're doing the things they want to do, whether it's retargeting or let's just say organic search, and you try something and you come in, I can then get a lot more, I'd say, intelligence about how the experiments are running, because I have the data as the foundation to base it upon with the metrics that are tied to it. So then when it comes to that decision making, they are much faster, but also they're tied to metrics that we believe are trackable. And so all round, that level of trust that I'm coming back to again is hugely important. So it means that the next time I run an experiment, the foundation's good.
Yeah, know your data.
Know your data. And I know it's it's incredibly cliche for me to say that about these things, but I think a lot of the time the temptation is to add another solution, add another solution, add another solution. But the thing is, what often you'll have hundreds of MarTech solutions. If you think about the average MarTech stack, it's well over, like I think I saw a stat for 120, 130 different solutions. That's a lot of data in a lot of different pots.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult for organizations to get that truth about that because it's spread. And so getting your arms around it means you can be a lot more informed to then deliver higher levels of trust.
Yeah, and I mean, then if you want to consolidate your data, you want to find the optimal tool to do that.
Indeed.
And just doing that that project is huge as well. So that when you take that decision on what tool to use, it's such a huge decision that it's also like you're being a little bit afraid, and it takes time, and you're not moving forward. Or
Absolutely, and I think that the challenge is always that people think add another tool and add another tool because the previous tool didn't work, so I'll try another one. And that's not necessarily the right answer, because it may have been more around the metrics you were using weren't the right ones. It may have been that the data that you had actually wasn't good in the first place. So it's not the tool's fault, it's more the data that you put in it. So I used to work in CRM a lot, and so one of the things I used to say is that garbage in, garbage out. And you're only as good as the data that you put into the system. It's not necessarily the system's fault that you haven't got good data. It's more around, well, what data points are you capturing? What is that data? So to come back to the who, the which, and the when, it's about, well, what's its purpose? What is it doing? What data points are you capturing? Have you got enough data points? Yes, no, maybe. So it's about getting all of those things together to then, as I said earlier, form an opinion around it, to build levels of trust, and then hopefully to drive really good behavior.
But also, I should say, know your tools. As you say, the data need to be good, but you also need to be good using the tool. And what we've seen also, often you have a certain KPIs connected to the tool, and then you have a huge number of KPIs, and often they are pointing in different direction. So it's not the direction of the company; it's many directions.
how long did it take for HelloFresh to consolidate their data?
Oh, it's months, and so it's just, and it's always a constant process. I don't think you're ever at the point where you're finished with consolidating, because there is always a new tool, there is always a new solution. And so for organizations I speak to all the time, they will say, well, I've got this data pot. Oh no, and by the way, I'm using an Amazon storage. I've got this and that and whatever. And then you think, oh my goodness, there's another data point. And then someone else has taken some data and put it in a spreadsheet. And then you got another data point. And it's only while people can do it, they will, and then you'll discover more of it. And I think that the short of it is you will never be finished doing that, to be frank, because there will always be another spreadsheet, another database, another tool where someone has put more data.
But didn't HelloFresh do like an internal project regarding the data or something?
Yes, absolutely. So this is born out of that. So this trust initiative and the definition of the metrics is exactly that point. So you can't get to the point of having the metrics and having the trust without running that internal project. So they had a project where they analyzed all of the different data sources, and then to understand where they all are, and then to build out levels of trust. Because one of the key things that was stopping them from doing that was they didn't have trust in the data that they were using to run this program in general. So therefore, there was an internal project to actually then gain levels of trust, build that trust as a foundation for then running the experiments. So yes, is the answer, running that project. And again, that's something that I think was necessary, completely necessary. Otherwise, it's difficult to build it. It's like a house on very poor foundations. Poor foundations means your house isn't very stable.
So what was the next step with HelloFresh then, after the consolidation of data?
To be frank, running more experiments and the ability to do so. So faster is the short with confidence. And so most of it, I would say, is about, for them, running the ability to run more experiments. And that really is the top metric for most people, because I have data that forms an opinion. I can then run much more experiments. It gives me the ability to be quicker about doing it. And that's the point in general about experimentation, is that I should be fast to have an opinion, because I can do it quickly. I can then quickly set up the experiment, test it, try it, throw it away, test it, try it, continue. Next. And so that agility with HelloFresh and with others is the key thing they get to by having this core data foundation. So much more, much faster. And whether it's HelloFresh or Hewlett-Packard, for example, that we work with. Again, what was their key metric? More experiments, faster, the ability to deliver more. Why? Because have foundation to do so, and so on and so on. So the point I'm getting to is that good data enables you to experiment more and experiment faster.
And what was the outcome with HelloFresh and your collaboration?
So the outcome, a wide variety of things, but I would say the key thing I mentioned earlier was the ability to track on 150 different metrics, and so increasing their conversions. I haven't got the stat in my head; it's left my brain for the moment. But where we have that, it's just the increase to touch on much more touch points to deliver increased numbers of conversions and the ability to do what they call winbacks, which is getting people to be retargeted by virtue of when you try and you buy and maybe you don't like the service, but then to win them back and encourage them to come back. And that's quite a common experimentation strategy. I know you've been searching for this. I know that you are interested in my brand. I want to win you back, to convert you back. And so it's about having the offer. And that's the kind of metric that they have, which is to win you back to the product or service that otherwise, maybe for whatever reason, you were a previous customer or whatever, and I want to then reintroduce you to our brand and to win you back over.
Any
Now,
comments?
I'm a little bit interested, Simon, in terms of scope here, because I completely understand that it takes time to consolidate data.
Yes.
But given the story that you told, I'm thinking that it then afterwards also took time to rebuild trust in the data in the organization. So if I'm a retailer now thinking that I need to do this project, and I'm in a similar situation, in terms of return on investment, I need to not only focus on when data is consolidated from a technical point of view, but also that it does take some time after that until trust is rebuilt and you get the full sort of benefit from your investment. Is that a correct assumption, or?
Absolutely, you do want a job at Optimizely because you've summed it up brilliantly. so that you're spot on. I think good data sets a good foundation for doing everything. So therefore, there will always be a need and a want to do that, to drive good behavior and good experiments. And so with the example I gave around trust, as I said, I come from a world previously where I worked at CRM vendors, and I call it lights on, lights off type scenarios, where to keep the lights on for any good organization that relies upon data, you need good systems to have good data. And so without that, it's very difficult for you then to run whatever the behavior might be, whether it's experimentation, whether it's CRM data, whether it's powering your MarTech stack. If you've got poor data to do that upon, then it's very difficult to be able to do whatever you would like to do. You have no confidence in it, there's no trust in it, there's no ability to do whatever you'd like to do, because what's the point in running an experiment if the data you're using to run the experiment has no foundation to it? Your hypothesis is invalid. So you're absolutely correct in what you said. I think it's about that, understanding where the data comes from, as I said earlier, the who, the which, the when, understanding what it is, what we're looking to target. Is it tied to our KPIs and our metrics? Yes, it is. And then subsequently then building that as my foundation. So I touched on the toolkit that we have that supports that kind of thing, where you can then say, well, plan out how this is going to work as a program. Once I've planned that out, then start with your experiments. Just start testing. If you've not tested before, go away, test, try. You won't know until you try.
Now, Magnus, you had a Jeff Bezos quote earlier, which kind of, not everybody agreed, but I'm gonna actually try with the Bezos quote also, because he's quoted for saying, "Our success at Amazon is a function of how many experiments we do per year, per month, per week, per day." So I'm thinking on the back of that, and I think maybe Simon, you would be the one to answer this. Is there sort of a limit as to how many experiments you can run?
No, is the short answer. There's not a limit to the number of experiments, but what I would say is that running too many experiments, they can collide or clash with each other, because there's got to be a point to running an experiment. And I've, not necessarily in this life, but in previous lives, seen organizations that run hundreds of experiments on a single page. Now, you would argue, my goodness, that's complicated, and it is. So it's difficult to know whether or not that one experiment has influenced another in terms of the behavior, so they can clash with each other. So as long as that's well planned, fine. But actually, there could be a limit by virtue of what is reasonably understandable or reasonable to draw an opinion or a conclusion from. So there's no hard and fixed limit. No, there isn't. But it's what I would determine is what is reasonable to form a hypothesis around. And I know that's a very generic answer because it is. It's just it's just more around the fact that if you have hundreds of experiments running on the same page, obviously common sense will tell you that's too many experiments. But there's no physical limit that stops you.
Okay, so in short, there's only one wrong number of experiments to run, and that's 0, right?
That's absolutely correct.
Good point.
Anything you want to add on this, Magnus?
A small question about HelloFresh. You could start as a single employee in a company, but when you do it as huge or as big as HelloFresh, is it up from the leaderboard or C-level, or is it more like okay, marketing department wanted to do this, or at what level? Because when you start scaling up, you need yeah, you understand.
Absolutely. So for organizations where you're like them or like any organization, an established brand, you would need to get the buy-in all the way from the top because you're affecting, for example, the conversion funnel, customer acquisition funnel. You're affecting behaviors. So to be frank, it's going to be noticed. So you might not get the buy-in from C-level and beyond to do the experiment, especially if you're doing experiments that affect something which is as fundamental as the buy button. So if you're doing something on that, you're affecting something which affects the bottom line. So therefore, you have to get that buy-in. I would argue you would never get to do that experiment without getting the buy-in because they would never trust you to do so. So therefore, or at least you'd be fired afterwards by doing it. So therefore, you need to get their buy-in before you run the experiment. So then you've got them on board, then you agree the metrics that you want to run together to make sure that what looks good, what's good behavior, how long should I run the experiment for? So you think, well, actually, I'm going to run it for a seasonal period. So I run it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But you know your audience because you know how many people go through your acquisition funnel. I know that there are going to be this many people, this time of day, doing this kind of thing. Fine. And then run the experiment, try again, etc. But yes, you 100% have to get buy-in.
But to minimize the risks, isn't working with, for example, digital twins a good solution then?
Yes, absolutely. So minimizing risk, there is always, if we're transparent, there is always a risk attached to running any experiment. So, because you don't know what the outcome might be. So where you're running that test to make sure that you're doing it, you're doing that off the foundations I mentioned earlier of high trust data. So you're doing it based on the fact that you've got information that's informing you about the kind of test that you want to run. So based on the fact that you have that information to then validate why you're doing the test for the agreed amount of time you're doing it, then you will then choose the areas of your site or your app or the thing that you would like to do it on based on that evidence. So in short, I would say it's about having that confidence to do it. But look, I mean, fools rush in as well at the same time. They do. So therefore, if you've never done experimentation before, one of the rookie mistakes, to mention another one, is don't do it on somewhere where you've not got an opinion about it, where you don't know what you might get as a result. So you're going to do it on the key shopping day for the whole of the year. So you do it on like the day when everyone goes online to buy Christmas presents. Probably not the best day to go and do it if you're doing it on something where you've never tried something before. Now that's just common sense rather than anything else. So test on the right places of your site, make sure you have a reasonable hypothesis of what's going to happen, and then based on that, run the test. Yeah. Get testing.
Yeah. And a common thing if you're testing, you mentioned on email the title. Often in the system as a start, if you make an A/B test, there are 5% A test, 5% B test, and then you could see which one turned out to be the best, and the rest of the 90% get the best result. So there's 5% of your audience that will see something else.
Got it. So now I was just wondering if we have some questions from the audience who are looking, and I think we do. Let's read. How compliant is Optimizely in terms of data privacy? Is data hosted in EU only, Simon?
So we're fully compliant with local laws and legislation, and data is hosted actually around the world. So in terms of that, you're choosing the appropriate data center by which the data will be hosted locally towards in the appropriate jurisdictions. So If you're in the EU, you're getting it in the EU. If you're in the United States, you're getting it in the United States. So therefore, we're fully compliant with the appropriate ways in which data should be kept in the appropriate zones. So yes, is the answer.
What are the key metrics and indicators to monitor during an A/B test, and how can businesses ensure accurate measurements? Magnus. Congratulations.
Thank you. The key metrics, that apply a little bit to what you want to achieve. You need to have the metrics for what you want to achieve, and how the company can assure it's right. To come back to what we talked about before, the data quality.
And also connected to the business goals, the overall KPIs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely good metrics. It's absolutely important. Don't have, dare I say it, rubbish metrics.
No.
Where things that you are literally untrackable and not tied to the core business goals. That's, I think, is another rookie mistake, if you will, is that having poor metrics that you can't ever quantify in some regard.
Exactly.
I mean, an easy metric is like how many people are buying this, especially this product, right? But if you want to measure engagement, what are the metrics you would say?
But often you need more than one metrics. You need through the whole buying stage, the whole funnel, and try to follow people the whole way. What are they doing? What are the trends? Where they drop off? What they're doing? So if you want
where do they engage? And where do they not
if you want to
engage?
start from a banner to see if they actually buy something, it's a quite long journey, and you need to have measure points all the way.
That's right, and I think the important thing around that is influencing. So therefore, is it the fact that I came from organic search? Yes. That influenced my behavior. So then I landed on the homepage. Right, well, that influenced my behavior because I saw the right hero banner. Great. Well, then the next thing. So you could arguably point to the fact that each experiment, if it was an experiment, influenced the behavior by which at the point I got to the end goal, which was to click or to do the thing you would like me to do. So a lot of the time people are, dare I say it, looking at the final click as being the thing, and that's really important. But there's lots of other things you can do to influence the behavior on the way, and organizations that I know run lots of experiments that try and influence you passively by maybe changing the picture or the text or the banner to then try and persuade you to take the next step in the journey towards the end of the journey. So it doesn't have to be a hard metric. It can be the fact that you did a click, and it's a series of clicks in the journey towards the end result.
Oh, this is an interesting one. How does AI revolutionize A/B testing for more optimal decision-making processes?
One thing I should say, it's much easier to find actually who to target, because you can look into maybe a CRM database or look into your customer to find trends. Who should I measure upon? That's one really good thing. And of course, in analyzing data to understand the behavior of the customer, there you have a lot of help.
Simon, what do you say about AI?
Sure. So we have long-standing relationships with AI providers, and in fact, we have a long-standing relationship with Microsoft, where we've been working with OpenAI and in general. So that's something that, again, I work very closely with Microsoft in my day-to-day, and so we are always looking for ways in which we can take in and enhance and add to all manner of different AI points, whether that's doing business rules to look for intelligence and to do the next best thing, or to drive behaviors, whether it's smart-based things in terms of generating text, to then subsequently put in options for how text might populate certain responses. That's across our wider platform. But if we look at more closely in terms of some of the things we're doing around experimentation, we're actually working at the moment on some very exciting projects that I can't disclose about at this time, where that talks directly to AI to then work with stimulating the right responses in terms of experimentation and putting in smart language-based features directly within experimentation. I can't go into the detail on that, but that's one thing. And of course, the other thing to say is, we actually have AI directly in our experimentation platform anyway, because we use things like the machine-based learning to do MAB testing, so the multi-arm bandit testing, to allow you to look at the size and look and see what's happening, and then to automatically target the winning or the best behaving variation on an experiment. So that's doing that by those rules, that engine, to automatically drive traffic towards the winner. So that's the machine doing the work rather than anything else.
The hot topic, AI. Interesting. So we are almost done. 1 hour goes fast when you are having fun. I think that this. I didn't always get the answers that I wanted. I'm like a little bit of a control freak. Like I want to know the outcome and so forth. But I think that Karsten, I think that we just need to start and try out. I can't say that enough. I think this is very important. I mean, we marketing people, we've been playing around a lot, just trying things out. But today we really need to focus on to actually deliver value, whatever value that is. I think that's really important. What do you want to finish off with, Karsten?
I completely agree, Eleanor. It's been a pleasure, Simon. It's been a pleasure, Magnus. And I would say that to my point earlier that there's only one wrong number. I think there's also, there's no bad test. You can. I mean, you just need to test. That's what I'm going to take away from this. So test if you don't already do it, and if you are testing, test some more.
So. Thank you so much from us in the studio. We wish you a pleasant Tuesday and have a nice summer. Bye.